Before we jump into the lists, let's keep in mind a few things. Number one, we're going to be keeping the cost down by buying high point per dollar value models. Number two, we're going to be making the list in increments so that you can play as you build up your army. You should not be buying all of this all at once. You will get overwhelmed. Number three, we're going to avoid resin models because Games Workshop resin is bad and overpriced. Number four, we're going to make the list strong enough so that you will not automatically lose your games when you go up to play. It will actually come down to your abilities. And number five, I'm not going to be listing all the good models for an army. If your favorite models aren't here, you can cut something out from my list so that you can run that instead. The Tyranids are a seemingly endless swarm of giant carnivorous bugs. They consume biomatter and turn it into even more bugs that then consume more biomatter to make even more bugs. All of these bugs are getting controlled by a large hive mind that allows for huge varieties of these monstrous bugs to work together with incredible intelligence. And they are adaptable to the point that you cannot stop them with any kind of plague or virus. You might slow them down, but they will never be stopped. As far as the pros for getting into Tyranids, you have a lot of variety in how you can collect the army. You can spam hundreds of smaller models, or you can stick to just a dozen or so giant monsters, and both are going to work well. They play the missions very well. The army has a lot of cheap, disposable tools in its utility belt that can make the more annoying missions feel very trivial. They are also one of the best new player armies because it lets you learn so many different styles of gameplay. They have a great intro box that will enable you to collect 2 armies at once for less than other armies have to pay to collect just 1. They also have a lot of new sculpts that look incredible, but the basic design of Tyranids lends itself very well to the older models also looking great. The buff they received to their Synapse and recent rules updates has also done a lot to improve the viability of melee options for the army so that they aren't just a shooting threat. There are a few things that you need to be aware of before you start collecting Tyranids though. First and foremost, most of the units are under 2 points per dollar, even for a lot of the bigger bugs. So the cost of an army can be high if you don't take advantage of good deals or the most cost efficient Tyranids that are available to you. Their combat patrol also is not even worth buying. Instead, you should buy the 40k starter kit. It's going to give you almost everything that's in it, and it's going to be way cheaper. The most cost-efficient ways to get models is going to result in a lot of monopose, push-fit models, which can be great for beginners, but it's not amazing for customization. Also, your personal lore for Tyranids sucks. By the nature of being a non-humanoid army with no actual personality inside of your units, your entire lore is from the perspective of the people who you are invading. The lore surrounding them is great, but you can't expect any good stories where Nids are going to be the protagonist. And finally, a good Tyranid paint job is going to take a lot of time, as you will probably wind up painting a lot of bugs, especially if you like that horde style. The army can look incredible, but it's going to take some effort. The Tyranid army rule is broken up into 2 parts. You have Synapse and Shadow in the Warp. Shadow in the Warp is mostly going to be there as a support tool to enable you to turn off your opponent's ability to hold objectives and use stratagems, and your Synapse is primarily going to be there to make it so that your melee attacks are going to be better for your army. If you want a pretty well-rounded Tyranid list that can kind of support any units whatsoever, you're going to be wanting to look at the Invasion Fleet. You're going to pick something between either targeting infantry, targeting monsters' vehicles, or targeting characters. Depending on what you choose, your whole army is going to be getting buffs on attacks into those specific types of units. Regardless of what direction you want to take your Tyranids, I do recommend that you go with the starter set and the Lictor to start. It's going to give you a lot of good value because the starter set just has so much inside of it, and the Lictor is a very valuable character who you will want in almost every single list that you're going to run. From there, as we expand into the Invasion Fleet more, we're going to be picking up a Hive Tyrant who is going to start off as a walking Hive Tyrant before turning into a Swarm Lord, and we're also going to be picking up 2 boxes of Toxicranes which are going to turn into Maleceptors. At 1500 points, we're going to be picking up a Tyrannifex to add in some extra firepower. We're going to be picking up a box of Gene Stealers, and we're going to grab a Broodlord to lead them. And then finally, to round things out at 2000 points, we're going to pick up 2 boxes of Harspecs to be turned into Exocrines, a second box of Gene Stealers, and a second Broodlord. The list at 500 points is going to look pretty simple. Winged Tyranid Prime, you've got 20 Termagants that can either be 2 10-mans or 1 20-man. You've got the 3 Von Ryan's Leapers, you've got the Lictor, you got 2 Ripper Swarms, and you've got a Psychophage. Now, for the way that the Tyranids are going to work with this detachment, the Winged Tyranid Prime and the Ripper Swarms are going to be doing a lot of your actions, whereas the Lictor and the Von Ryan's Leaper are going to be kind of melee threats. Psychophage just gives you extra durability. The most important thing here is that the Termagants are going to want to have different weapons than the Flesh Borers. They are only going to come with Flesh Borers in the kit that you are going to be getting, but as long as your opponent doesn't care, you're going to swap them out for Spine Fists so that their Termagants can have pistols with assault. When we're looking at the 1,000 point list for the invasion fleet, you're going to be bringing in a Hive Tyrant because of how the points are going to work out, and it works out nicely with the adaptive biology as well. And everything else is going to be pretty much the same. Maliceptors are going to be pretty good durable units, and the Psychophage is still going to be giving out its aura to make things tougher. Important to note is that this Hive Tyrant is going to be changed into a Swarm Lord, so if you have to build it as a Swarm Lord, you can. Alternatively, you can do something like magnetizing the heads. For that 1500 point list, as I said, the Swarm Lord is now going to actually be a Swarm Lord and not a Hive Tyrant, and we're going to be shifting around a couple of the enhancements. The Tyrannifex with Rupture Cannon is going to be able to be a very solid long-range anti-tank threat, and the Gene Stealers with Broodlord are going to be able to put out a lot of damage, especially with the changes to Synapse that I mentioned earlier in the video. And just like all the previous lists before it, the 2,000 point list for the Invasion Fleet should look pretty simple. You could go ahead and put Adaptive Biology onto the second Broodlord if you really wanted to, but I've decided to keep it here so that the Winged Tyranid Prime can drop in, do an action, and maybe actually survive with the Feel No Pain. It's unlikely that it will, it'll still probably get picked off, but it feels a little bit more useful to me than having it on the Broodlord, who is useless once the Gene Stealers that he's leading have died. Exocrines are just going to be able to provide solid support both to each other and to the Tyrannifex by allowing it to reroll hits. If you want to run a smaller number of really big bugs though, and really feel like you've got a bunch of Godzillas running around, you're going to want to look at the Crusher Stampede. You're going to be getting extra bonuses to hit, you're going to be getting extra bonuses to wound, and then you can also be getting extra bonuses to your objective control to hold points. You're not going to get access to all these buffs at once. It's going to depend on how healthy your monsters are, but it's all still good buffs. For the Crusher Stampede list, you're going to be starting off exactly the same. You're going to be getting the starter set and the Lictor and just running it as Invasion Fleet. But once you get up to 1,000 points, we're going to be going and picking up a Tyrannifex and a Haruspex to be turned into an Exocrine and a Hive Tyrant, who is actually going to stay a Hive Tyrant on foot the whole time. Moving into 1,500 points from there, we're going to be going and picking up a second Tyrannifex because Big Bug Shooty is very good, and we're also going to be picking up the biggest bug in the Norn Emissary. And finally, rounding it out at 2,000 points, we're going to be picking up a second Lictor, a third Tyrannifex, and a second Norn Emissary. For the 1,000 point list for Crusher Stampede, the Winged Tyranid Prime is still just basically going to be a Deep Strike Action Monkey and potential backline objective harasser. The real big thing here is the Hive Tyrant taking Monstrous Nemesis. It's going to make it very easy for this thing to be able to kill whatever kind of vehicles or monsters it has to go into a charge for. The Tyrannifex normally would be run with Rupture Cannon in a lot of scenarios, but a Tyrannifex with Acid Spray is actually going to be a little bit more useful here, given that the Hive Tyrant can already handle the monsters and vehicles that you're going to deal with, and the Exocrine is also going to be able to be a good threat in that department. For 1,500 points, the second Tyrannifex is going to be getting the Rupture Cannon so that it has the extra synergy with the Exocrine, and the Norn Emissary is just going to be built as a Norn Emissary. Its job is to go out there, stand on whatever point you want, be very annoying, and make your opponent have a miserable time trying to kill it. Finally, for the 2,000 point list, second Norn is going to do the exact same thing as the first, but that way you can send them off in waves if you need to, or maybe even stand them on different points. And then you're going to have the second Tyrannifex with a Rupture Cannon so that it can just plink off whatever you need and also be able to support the first Tyrannifex with a Rupture Cannon. If you want to feel like you have a lot of bugs on the battlefield though and can kind of blanket the board and your control, I personally like Assimilation Swarm for that. You're going to be having units that are spread around giving out buffs to all of your other Tyranids, and you're going to be regenerating models, whether that be wounds to your big monsters or just picking up tons of little guys that have died throughout the battle. If you are interested in the absolute cheapest way that you can get to a full Tyranids army and you like the Assimilation Swarm, then this is going to be the one for you. We're going to be starting off the exact same way, starter set and a Lictor, but we're going to be picking up a second starter set and a Hive Tyrant. This Hive Tyrant is going to be built as a flying Hive Tyrant, and the second starter set is going to be able to give us the extra Psychophages that are going to help enable the Assimilation Swarm. At the 1500 point value, we're going to be picking up a third starter set because of just how much value we're going to be able to get out of it, but we're also going to pick up a Tyrannifex. Now, it's not going to be built as a Tyrannifex like we did earlier. Instead, it's going to be built as a Tervigon to support all of these Termagants that we're going to be building. And finally, rounding it out at 2000 points, we're going to be picking up a Haruspex to be built into an Exocrine, just like always. And we're going to be picking up a Norn Emissary who also benefits from a lot of the Assimilator rules. For 1000 points, the list is going to look pretty simple. The biggest thing about it is that because of the way that the Assimilation Swarm works and how it regenerates all of your models, you are really going to want to make sure that your Termagants are being put into the 20-man bricks instead of the 10-man bricks. This is going to make it easier for you to generate more of them, and it's also going to make it easier for them to be in range of the Psychophage to get some Feel No Pains to keep even more of them alive. Because we're going to be having so many Winged Tyranid Primes that aren't going to be able to have anything to run with them, you're going to be able to have a lot of deep strike threats to be able to get into your opponent's backfield to do objectives or even take their home. Because of all of the points that we've been able to pick up from these boxes, we're actually going to be able to cut one of the Winged Tyranid Primes from the list because we don't need that much backline threat, especially with the Ripper Swarms also in the army. The Tervagons with the Psychophages and all of the buffs that we can give out are going to make these 20 Termagants decently hard to get rid of. They will still get picked up by some very dedicated anti-infantry units, but you will be able to get a lot of sneaky plays by regenerating them onto objectives. And in our 2000 point list, it's going to look very similar to what you would have expected. We're going to have all 3 of the Winged Tyranid Primes back in. We're going to be making use of all 3 of our Ripper Swarms. We're going to be having all 3 Psychophages. And then the Exocrine and the Norn Assimilator are just going to slot in. Important to note, it is going to be a Norn Assimilator and not a Norn Emissary that we build out of the box because the Norn Assimilator is the only one of them that gets the Assimilator keyword. Overall, the Tyranids are going to be a pretty good army for you to start collecting, especially because of that start collecting box being able to allow you and a friend to be able to join at the same time and have armies that can compete fairly well with each other. They're going to typically cost you around $800 to run through, so they're pretty middling in terms of affordability, but as long as you are doing a good job of spacing out these purchases, you should be completely fine. Between the 3 lists that I presented to you today, I think that you have plenty of options to be able to get into Tyranids, depending on what style of Tyranids you are most interested in. Big shout out to all of my channel supporters who help make these videos possible, such as Alexander Thomas, and everyone else who's been generous enough to support me. If you would like to try and help out the channel, please consider the links in the description where you can either check out the Amazon affiliate link or go support me on Ko-fi. Thank you all for watching.